Well, it looks like I'm live for Chess University, and I'm not sure how many people are already watching because we just started. So I'll give you guys a second to tune in. And yeah, I'm excited for this stream. For those that don't know me, I'm International Master Kostya Kavutskiy, and I'm one of Chess University's head instructors. Been working with Kairav and the CU group for I think over 2 years now, teaching a bunch of classes in the Prodigy program, doing some courses, and now we're getting into the streaming game as well with these weekly educational streams. So today we're going to be doing a game analysis featuring games from viewers and students, and oh, I think we got. I didn't notice. Seems like we got a follower, which is cool. This is one of my first times using the alerts, so I'm very excited to see how those are going to work out. And yeah, any technical feedback, you guys can let me know in the chat if you know, those jingles are too loud or whatever. I can reduce the volume. So it looks like we have one person in the chat so far, Mr. Golval. Hello. I'm just going to give people a couple minutes to kind of settle in and get to the stream. The way this Twitch thing is working is really cool. I think if you follow Chess University, then you get notified whenever we're live, or at least it shows up, you know, on your Twitch homepage. So it's important to follow the channel if you guys are wondering, you know, when you can see more streams. And we'll be streaming every Sunday. For those that don't know, this is our weekly slot for chess.com, Sundays 2 to 4 p.m. Pacific time. I think today chess.com is not ready to host us just yet because of the candidates tournament that ran super long, mainly because Kramnik was trying to push this endgame that he had no business winning. But anyways, they're currently doing I think the qualification or the highlights show with Robert Hess and Kachin, and then after that I think they're going to host us as well. Well, thank you for those of you that are here so far, and we're going to start with the game analysis here. I'm kind of waiting to see if Ben Wick will show up. He's the user that submitted this game via email, and we're going to start with his game, and then after that I'll take games from the viewers. If you guys have a game you would want to see analyzed live on the show, I'm very excited to do this. I think game analysis is one of the most important things you can do to improve your chess, and I think a lot of players don't really know how to analyze games properly, and I think it's really helpful to see like a stronger player analyze your game you know, in front of you or with you, so that you can kind of see what is important to kind of consider in the different positions. Let's see. And I do like to make my streams interactive, so whenever you guys have questions in the chat, you know, feel free to throw them my way, whether it's about the game we're looking at, or, you know, the chess part, the analysis part, whatever it is you are interested in. But let's start with the game, because I think Ben Wick will join us at some point, and for the moment he sent in this game and he said the opening was quite interesting, and yeah, he wasn't wrong. So it looks like he's playing black here against 1800 Mr. I want to say San Diego Min SoCal, though I'm not sure what the username means. Oh, and Ben Wick is here in the chat. Welcome. So what I would like to do for the game analysis is I definitely want to start with some kind of background info on the game, because context is important. So maybe you can let everyone in the chat know, like, was this a blitz game, rapid game, tournament game, you know, over the board, in person? It seems like, based on the usernames here, that it was probably an online game. And you already mentioned that the opening was interesting. If there are any other, let's say, interesting moments in the game as we go through it, make sure to let me know, because this is my first time seeing the game. I might miss a critical moment or might gloss over something. But yeah, I would like to do you know, good job analyzing the game, and to kind of give you guys some useful lessons from each game. So this was a 3-day correspondence game, and it was the semifinal match for a team game. Oh, okay, awesome. So correspondence meaning you guys both have plenty of time to consider your moves, and semi-final match means it was quite an important game. Cool. Okay, so white plays this knight f3 ready, d5, and b4. So the idea is, okay, just to kind of develop in an enterprising way, he probably wants to put the bishop on b2, and this pawn on b4, I think the reason to advance it to b4, not to b3, is to just gain a little bit more space on the queen side and not allow black to put a pawn on c5. So it's not super terrible. No, I think it's actually quite a normal opening. I think bishop g4 makes sense to develop the bishop before putting the pawn on e6. Black also has ideas here of just taking the knight on f3 and playing kind of like a reverse Kavutskiy. And this is always a solid way to play because, well, the rest of your pieces are going to get decent squares. You're going to have, easy control over the center, and in general, black's position will be very solid. So for those of you that want your game analyzed next, stay tuned. I'm going to try not to spend too much time on one game, maybe 15 to 20 minutes. And after each game is done, I will take suggestions from the chat. So if you're watching and you want to submit the game, you'll have to submit your game through the chat, and I'll let you guys know how that works later on. But hopefully I'll get a chance to do quite a few games today. Okay, so white plays e3, and so he clearly indicates that he doesn't want to play with the double pawn. So now bishop takes f3, he's ready to take back with the queen. And now black takes the opportunity to play e5 because white just created this pin. So yeah, I think this is a good move, and I think this is definitely the move I would play here. When your opponent gives you a chance to take control over the center, I think if you can hold on to the center, then you should typically go for it. And here I think it's working. Number one, black already has this threat e4. It's not a huge threat because white will have this counter with h3. So for example, if white plays bishop b2 here, I'm not sure e4 is actually all that good for black because white can play h3. If we take here, he takes our light squared bishop and he's ready to recapture on g2. And if black goes back, then white of course has to play g4. And evaluating this kind of position is always very tricky because now both sides have weak pawns. But I'm kind of skeptical about this from black's point of view because the f3 pawn is hanging immediately. This bishop on b2 looks really strong. I mean, this pressure looks like it's no joke. And in general, I think the bishops are quite good pieces, and here white's light squared bishop is going to be a really strong piece. So black probably can't go for that. Maybe bishop g6 would be played, but then we didn't really get anything from this advance other than opening up white's bishop. So white can continue knight to d4, and I think the position is reasonable. Of course, this pawn on b4 is hanging, but even that doesn't seem so clear because the pawn on g7 might be maybe knight e5 here. In some cases threatening to take and take the pawn on g7. So against bishop b2, I would likely play the move knight d7, just strengthening the center. And now black is starting to take this pawn on b4. White might play something like a3, and then black can continue very, very solidly. And this is typically a really good setup for black in this kind of position. Knight goes to f6, queen can go to e7. You can castle either way, but usually king side is going to be more solid. And the pawn can go to c6. This pawn can challenge white with a5. And I think black's structure is just going to be really solid. Okay, so white played bishop e2, and that's definitely an interesting choice. Clearly he was worried about e4, and now black plays it. Knight d4 takes, queen takes e2, and then we can't take the pawn here because queen b5 check is going to be bad for black. Knight c6, we trade, and then we pick up the bishop. So black played a6. Understandable move in order to control this b5 square. I think maybe c6 was kind of more natural because you do want to strengthen the center. And this knight on b8, I mean, it's not really coming out to c6. Usually it sits very solidly on d7. So maybe this was worth considering. But I want to go back here because I don't think e4 is necessarily the best move here. The pawn on e5 is currently hanging, but we can defend it with knight to d7. And I think this is preferable. Assuming white doesn't have any tactics with knight takes e5. I don't think they do because we take here and then we're threatening the queen. I think if we can hold on to the center, it's usually better than to commit too early, because whenever we push e4, we are giving up the d4 square. And strategically, this is not ideal. Fisher said, you know, to get squares, you got to give squares, but I don't exactly see what squares we're getting with e4, whereas it's very clear that white is going to use this d4 square. So I would be more measured here, especially with black. You can't be, let's say, too ambitious too quickly. And then I think black is not going to have any problems here. White will defend the b4 pawn, black can play bishop d6, and stick to this setup. I think it's actually known as the universal setup, where I'm going to write that in the chat so you guys can remember. Because it's very frequently seen against a lot of different lines. But it's basically knight f6, knight bd7, bishop d6, and queen e7. Whether or not you get the bishop out to g4, sometimes it can sit on c8. And with white, you can kind of imagine the reverse. It's always kind of this nice compact setup that gives you a good position. Okay, so Benwick says, my main issues were how to structure the pawns on the queen side and an interesting tactical tension later. All right, well, let's get to it. So yeah, like I mentioned, I think maybe c6 would be more constructive here. But a6 is okay. Now both sides continue developing. Then you do play c6. And now g6. Okay, so black is taking a lot of liberties here, because we're making a lot of pawn moves, and now we're playing g6, presumably to stop knight f5, which does seem like an annoying move. But we have to be careful here because white has small lead in development. So after g6, I think f3 was the right move, as your opponent played. And I think this is not exactly... I think black is still more or less okay, but not exactly the best you could have hoped for. In fact, I don't really see a big reason not to play bishop g6 here. If white goes for the bishop, well, we can castle. Let's say he takes. I think I kind of like this more for black because we have given up the dark squared bishop, but I think the development here is still pretty nice. We can get the knight to d7. This knight can come to e5, rook at e8. I think white has a hard time here really getting much, and he's going to have to break with f3 most likely to get some kind of play. But the knight will be sitting very nicely on e5, and the knight on e5 is always threatening to play knight to c4, where you can just immediately trade off this bishop. So I think this is pretty comfortable for black. G6 might be okay, but it kind of depends on concrete calculation here, because like a lot of times a move like bishop b2 just puts so much pressure here because suddenly there's like all these tactics along the long diagonal. Not sure if anything here is really working, but we do have to be careful. This is the kind of position where I think it makes sense to turn on your engine and start to see whether it can find any tactical opportunities for white. In general, there's this taboo about analyzing with an engine. I think the engine is really useful if you're strictly using it to find key tactics that an engine just calculates much faster than any human. I mean, when you're analyzing with a stronger player, it's really more important to kind of pay attention to like the strategy of the position, maybe some key tactics, but nothing is going to point out, opportunities as quickly as an engine. And so it's very, very important to make use of that tool properly. A lot of players, they definitely rely on the engine too much. And I would say you have to be careful about that. Okay, so bishop g7, knight de2. So it seems like white is starting to regroup towards the king side. And d4 is one of the worst moves I've seen today. I wanted to say in a long time, but that's not true. Yeah, d4 is a really strange move here by white because, I mean, the natural intention would be to put the bishop on this diagonal where it can really target black's dark squared bishop here. But d4, I don't really see the idea here for white because it just seems like he's blocking his own diagonal. He's made the e3 pawn quite backwards. And now I think black just has a very, very clear strategic advantage. Now I think, black's position is probably much, much better. I mean, white just has so many weaknesses in the position now. So, yeah, I don't know if Mr. SD Min SoCal is watching, but yeah, this was definitely a questionable move. And I'm not sure exactly what the idea is either. Maybe he maybe he thought, you know, he has to get control over the center. Maybe he's worried about knight d7, knight e5. But whatever it was, the cure is kind of worse than the threat, I think, in this case. So queen e7, queen h3, and queen e6. Okay, Ben, to be honest, I don't like this queen e6 move, but maybe you can explain your thought process here. Because it seems like white's queen on h3 is not really threatening anything. So I guess I don't get the desire to exchange off this queen, especially when we have such an easy target on e3. I mean, that we should just immediately be piling up on. Like, I think rook fe8 here would be a very natural move, or maybe simply just to connect the rooks, play knight bd7, bring this knight to c4, and the e3 pawn is just going to be, you know, very, very difficult pawn to defend. Was there something you were, you know, worried about on the king side that caused you to trade queens? Because this move, I think it gives up black's advantage, not completely, but it gives up a lot, because after queen e6 takes, suddenly, well, the e3 pawn is still weak, but it's not in an open file anymore, so this pawn is suddenly very difficult to actually attack. This is actually an important lesson about weaknesses. So it's really easy to recognize when a pawn is weak, because it's backwards, no other pawns can defend it. But one of the more important things to consider is how easy it is for you to actually put pressure on this weakness. So for example, the a3 pawn is also kind of a backwards pawn. It's not going to be defended by, you know, another pawn anytime soon. But black has 0 ways of attacking it, so it's not relevant to the position. We wouldn't consider the a3 pawn a weakness at all. Maybe a potential weakness if you play b5, but potential means, you know, in the future, not right now. The e3 pawn is definitely an immediate weakness because we can easily, you know, put so much pressure on the e-file. But yeah, after this move, queen e6, now we have our own weakness to worry about. So I think this was, yeah, definitely not a good decision. Okay, well, knight f4 is played, rook e8. I still think black is much better here, because if you can break with e5, you're going to be able to open up the e-file again. You'll open up the diagonal, which will be really nice. And again, you can start targeting this weak pawn on e3. So here I think white really needed to make this move, knight d3, in order to control this e5 square and not allow black to break. He played knight a4, which, okay, makes sense, because knight b6 is going to be an annoying move, so black reacts. Now he plays knight to d3 to fight against e5. b5 is played, and he goes back knight to c3. I'm curious why he didn't go in for knight to c5. I think this is kind of the more natural choice. And then here, black can consider trading, and it's not clear how white recaptures, because if knight takes, again, we go for this e5 break, and I think black is doing well here. DC looks very suspicious because of the long diagonal, and that doesn't look good. So probably he would have to play bc5, and maybe a move like knight to d7, trying to break with e5, and black is definitely clearly better. The bishop on d2 is a really passive piece, and black has good, really easy play with this e5 break. Thanks for the, I want to say, cheer from Mr. Heyday Tony. Thanks for the bits, and also for letting me know that the feature is working, so that's cool. Nice surprise. Alright, so white played knight c3, then black breaks with e5. I think this is, as we mentioned, the right idea here for sure. And white exchanges, but now we're left with this e3 pawn that's really weak, and I think black should have an easy time to attack it. Okay, white played a4, trying to get any kind of play going. Knight c4, takes on b5, and knight e4. Very interesting. Okay, I think this is the tactical tension you were referring to. Yeah, good for you for not just automatically recapturing and looking for this additional opportunity. I don't know if this immediately works, because I'm not Stockfish. This is a engine where, this is a position where you can just feed it into the computer and it'll tell you immediately if black is winning or not. But it looks good. It looks good. This knight on c3 is hanging. The rook on a1 is hanging. So if he takes, we can either take on a1, or I think maybe even stronger is just recapturing the knight, and we're attacking the knight on d3, we're hitting the rook, and I think white is just losing significant amounts of material. Sometimes when you go for this tactical, shot with knight e4 after your opponent has captured a pawn, sometimes we have to be careful that they're not just going to keep taking pawns and promote, but it's not too difficult to see that this pawn on c6 is not really going anywhere. Black can just start taking pieces, should be completely winning. Okay, so white tried knight takes d5. I'm not sure what else can be suggested because I think all the moves are losing. Bishop takes a1, grabbing the rook. And b takes c6. Well, we got in a full rook, and I don't think white really has enough. Maybe there is something to be said about just taking the knight, because this is my personal philosophy on chess. I think we should try to keep things as simple as possible when we're winning, and reduce the complications in the position. So of course grabbing a rook is going to be nicer than taking the knight, but not only do we take the knight here, we also take away any potential knight forks, any knight c7s, knight f6, anything like that. The rook is still hanging, and probably he plays rook takes a6. And he has a couple of pawns for the piece, but I wouldn't trade here. I would play rook b8. Maybe this is the key move that black really needs to play here in order to win back one of the pawns immediately. And white just doesn't have enough. Definitely winning for black. This bishop on c1 is a really bad piece. Black will slowly start picking up pawns and should win easily. I think what black did in this game is also winning. It's actually a very funny position with all 4 knights here, just kind of in this little diamond shape. But I don't see how white can really get anything for the rook. The c pawn is strong, but yeah, we're gonna pick it up very soon. Okay, so black brought in the king, rook d4. And here white resigned because it's clear that he's not getting anything for the pawn. It's just going to end up down the rook. So overall, Ben, I think this was a good game. And actually, I don't think your move here, bishop takes a1, is bad at all. I mean, it looks like it was just easily winning. I would just say that taking the knight is also worth considering. Yeah, I think you exploited your opponent's play here pretty well. White's mistake here, I mean, the opening wasn't great, but this move d4, of course, just creates this, this huge weakness, and that's not good. I would say the only move here I would criticize is, of course, this move queen e6, because you have this big strategic advantage here, and I think you gave up some of it by weakening your structure, especially since white's queen on h3 is not such an impressive piece at all. So I definitely would have chosen knight d7 here, knight b6, and knight c4. Okay, but overall an interesting game. I think the endgame plan that you showed with breaking with e5, this was very instructive about how to exploit, a nice strategic advantage, because your pieces are clearly more active and white's pieces were never really able to get out. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to download the PGN of this game, because I'm just doing this on chess.com's analysis board. And if you want, Ben, I can actually just email you the PGN file later on, or as well as for anyone whose game we end up analyzing today, because then you guys can actually save the variations and even go over them later and learn a lot. All right, guys. So if someone has a game they would like to share, you basically just need to sell me on the game in the chat. So just let me know I played a super important game at my club or for the online tournament. And once you sell me the game, if I, quote unquote, call on you, then you can send me the link to it and we'll start analyzing it here. So you can also say something about how the game was really interesting, like if you had a brilliant queen sacrifice, this would be another example of selling the game. So make it sound interesting and engaging, and you'll have better chances of getting picked. For those of you that are writing these long strings of numbers, I assume, is this a link to the game? And if so, I see, I can just plug it in and then I would be able to copy it over. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, Heyday Tony says, I end up winning purely because he missed a mate. I appreciate your objective analysis of the game. It's really important actually to remain very objective, especially about your wins, because a lot of times I'll win games that look nice and flashy on the surface, but underneath, if you analyze it, you know, there's always stuff you missed and mistakes you made, and it's really important to treat every game objectively and not focus so much about the result. The result is important, but it never tells the whole story. I've definitely lost a lot of games where I felt like I played very well. My opponent just ended up playing a little bit better. And I've definitely won many, many games where I did not play well at all. And it's important to try and learn from your mistakes, no matter which games they come from. Okay. So far, Heyday Tony is the only one who's come up with a game and a story. So we're going to go with you. And let me see if I can just copy the game and find it real quick. And how would I... I'm curious, I'm not exactly sure how to look up a game using just a number. Like, what exact URL do I need to use? Maybe /game/ Nope. I guess I can go to games and then search. So you're saying I need to go / chess.com/live/game. I see. Yeah, I don't get the for some reason the Twitch chat autocorrects something that you guys are saying into the 3 stars, and then I don't understand what it is. But let me try this live/ live/game/ aha, I found the game. And let me copy it quickly here. Okay. And oh, are you saying was that the wrong number? I see. Cause yeah, I don't recognize the usernames. So I guess it's maybe not the right game. Oh, it's a daily game. So that means it's going to be a different, let me try daily. Different URL. Here we go. I think I found it. So let's get the PGN here. So sorry to whoever other game I found, but here we go. Okay, so give us some more context of this game. This is 1 day per move, and what do you think was kind of the critical idea here? Although I think you already mentioned, basically you're saying you didn't play so well here as black against someone who castles queenside, and then you end up winning by chance. Well, let's take a look. Looks like we have a French defense, which I used to play for many years. And white takes on d5, the exchange. Yeah, a lot of players are annoyed to face this with black, but I never minded because I always felt like I had a good setup against it that I could play. Okay, so he plays knight c3. So let's go through the opening moves here. There's really no way to go super wrong here from either side, as long as we just kind of stick to basic developing moves. And okay. So this is kind of like the critical moment here. As soon as white castles queenside, I'm wondering I mean, why aren't we playing bishop g4 here just to immediately grab material? Is there something I'm missing? It's very possible. I mean, I'm not far from perfect tactically, but just seems like we're winning the exchange here, right? Maybe even more. I mean, if white's not careful, like queen g3, I'm not sure I take on d1. I think maybe I throw in this move bishop d6, because white's queen is going to be you know, kind of an awkward spot here. Yeah, so I guess that would be the first thing. I mean, b5 is definitely like a very natural move because you're trying to attack, but you do have to be very tactically alert. I mean, you know, we can talk all day about strategy and pawn structure, but you have to be able to find these you know, these quick tactics where you can win material. But let me go back to the opening a little bit, because I feel like maybe we could have done better. I mean, I really don't like the way white played. This move, knight e5, knight takes d7. It's like he just gave you so many free developing moves by moving his knight 3 times to capture this knight on d7, and then helping you with developing their queen. So, hey, I think we're going to get a couple new viewers here because I saw the shout out in live chess. So if you guys want to get your game analyzed, basically just stick around until we're done with this one, and then you just have to sell me on the game. You just have to send me a link or the game number, and I'll be able to find it, and then a little bit of expose, you know, on whether the game was interesting or important in some way. Just make the game sound engaging, and I'll be more inclined to look at it. But for now, we're going with Mr. Tony's game. And then white plays this move bishop b5, which induces black to play this move c6 and goes back. I think this is a really helpful move because now we've like strengthened our center and we've taken control over this b5 square. So I have a lot to criticize about the way white played the opening. I think he's given black a lot of free moves. And in fact, I would already take black's side here because I feel like we're slightly ahead in development. So castles, queen f3 was played. And I think even here the move bishop g4 is interesting because this queen is just really short on squares. I mean, if queen g3, again, we have bishop d6, and white has to play f4 just to avoid losing the queen. And of course, with the king in the center, you know, we have these immediate follow-ups, right? Rook f8 check. Now white has to figure out how to defend against this, or if he's going to move his king. It looks really good for black. Not to mention, this bishop is defended by the queen, so we also have this move knight h5 whenever we want. So I think Mr. Tony, or Heyday Tony in the Twitch chat, I think here you had to be paying a little bit more attention to the fact that your opponent was actually spending a lot of time in the opening and giving you this lead in development, especially with black. If you ever castle before your opponent does, I mean, white made the first move. It means they really gave you a lot of extra time. And so it's important to look for ways to exploit that in direct means. So this bishop g4 move, I think it's honestly just very, very strong because the queen here just doesn't have good squares. If he goes queen e3, then we can play rook e8, and now we're threatening, you know, all kinds of discoveries. Very annoying for white to deal with. So I think, yeah, black could have definitely played this better. Of course, bishop g4 here was winning the exchange. Okay, so b5, a5. I mean, you're launching your initiative, which is definitely the right plan in this position. And now white finally realizes that he's hanging this bishop g4 threat, and he plays h3. a4. So I believe the idea is that you're pushing the a pawn first, because if b4, then white has this knight a4 square, or a4 square for the knight, and black gets a little bit stuck. So it makes sense to advance the a pawn first and not allow white to use this square. And now b4 is a pretty serious threat, and black can immediately think about just breaking everything open. Okay, white decides to take on f6, giving up the dark squared bishop, knight e2. Yeah, at this point I feel like black should be feeling very, very comfortable. So Tony, earlier you mentioned that you misplayed things, but I don't know. I mean, I think maybe you were kind of underestimating your own play because black has a big advantage here. The dark squared bishop is a really good piece, and it's clear that you're ahead on the queen side. Or did I misunderstand you? Did you feel like you were doing okay, and you just don't like your play from this point? Because b4 is very logical, but let's keep going. c4. This move is surprising. Usually you don't want to push pawns in front of your king because it's going to open more lines for your opponent, but I guess white felt like he's kind of desperate here and worried about the oncoming pawn storm. But I don't like c4. Black took on c4 with the pawn, which makes a lot of sense. Bishop b1. Oh, I see. Maybe his idea was to get the queen to e4 and go for this checkmate idea, but it's easily defended with g6. So yeah, it's very, very dubious the way white has played. c3. Yeah, looks good. I mean, at this point, we just want to open files. I think there are other moves we can play. You can start with bishop d5, for example. We can also play a3 here to open up the a file. I think this might be a little bit stronger because we're ready to take and then push c3 and then take on a2. And I think, yeah, this is probably a little bit faster to open up the king and win the game. I don't really see anything wrong with c3, but let's keep going. So takes, knight takes, bishop takes d4. Okay, so this move is, yeah, after queen e4, it's like a little bit, it's a little bit scary for black, right? Because suddenly this bishop on d4 is pinned. And I can see what you mean by you could have done better with the tactics. I agree. Normally, taking this pawn might be really good, but you are putting yourself in an immediate pin. And we have to recognize that this is going to be dangerous. We have this move c5 to secure the bishop. But the question is, did you see queen e4 coming and you thought you're okay after c5, or was this move a surprise and now you're scrambling and figuring out a defense and then you played c5? So it's a, you know, kind of a different story in both cases. Okay, well, c5 was played, and fortunately for black, white doesn't really have a good follow-up here because, well, the king has escape squares. So he tries f4, and black plays queen b7 to get out of the pin. f5. Black plays a3 with a pretty nice threat. F takes e6 and queen b2 mate, and that was the end of the game. Okay, well, overall, I mean, I think you played fine. I mean, after bishop takes d4, if white doesn't get anything with the check, then it's clear that it's white's king that's going to be, you know, in a lot of danger here. So I don't think you played it in the best way, but I don't see a reason to believe that black squandered the advantage at any point. I think even here, even though it looks scary, you found the right moves with a3, and I think this was enough for black to win the game. So yeah, it was kind of a close contest. Maybe white can do something here, but I don't see it really working. Like, for example, queen h8 check, king e7. There's no good follow-up. Like, rook takes e6. Sometimes this tactic works because queen takes g7, you win the queen, but of course the bishop on d4 is defending. And if white tries like rook takes d4 or something, maybe this was a good try. It's important that black does not just immediately recapture. Then these tactics start to be pretty annoying. And this is an example of how white can get back in the game from a bad position. But after rook takes d4, I think you can throw in queen b2 check. And then take. And here white just doesn't have the same attacking power, because of course he's not winning the queen. He has some annoying checks. Maybe this isn't super clear, but I think black should probably be okay, just kind of like running the king to the queen side. In any case, it definitely is kind of unclear position. So yeah, I think bishop takes d4 is a questionable move because it really gives your opponent a lot of chances in a position where it should be black who's attacking first. Maybe queen b7 or maybe a3. Some move that kind of helps your initiative looks better to me because white isn't really threatening this in most cases, and so you have time to kind of build up the attack. Earlier, I think maybe a3, as mentioned, would have been a better way to kind of open up white's king. And of course, we mentioned the previous ideas of this bishop g4 move, winning the exchange, and in the opening, I think here bishop g4 would have just given black a big initiative from the get-go. Okay, so I'm gonna download this one, and Tony, if you want the analysis, just send an email to Kostya at chessuniversity.com. That's my Chess University email, and I'll happily forward you the PGN. So let me download this one, and now it's time to get a new game. Okay, so I see Mr. Otis 1982 said I have some interesting over the board games, and yeah, email me the email I just mentioned, and I probably can't do you next, but email me and I think I can squeeze you in later on in the show because I'll be able to open the file and plug it in. But just email me one game. Don't send me a bunch because then I'll have to like pick and choose. But just choose the most interesting one and email me that one, and we'll take a look. Okay. So, Mr. Same Shaki, you've been here the whole time, and I'm gonna do your game next because you've been very patient. So let me see if I can copy this game in. And you say you won, but you need to know your mistakes in the first 5 moves. Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's see if I can copy this game in here. And why is it giving me a search? I want to go to this. So weird that it's doing this. Wow, why is it searching? Okay, let me just copy the game. How about that? Esoteric, this is a new stream that Chess University is doing. Oh, there's no dot, that's why. I see. So I wasn't giving a... Alright, thank you. Yeah, you gotta warn me about these things, man. Otherwise I'm gonna look like a fool. Wow, it's still not... Oh, okay. There was a second period. Alright, here we go. Here's the game. So this is a weekly stream we're doing in... for Chess University, and here we have the game from I believe you're playing white, Same versus Dr. Shakin. So let me copy this game over and plug it into our PGN here. Okay. So here we were playing white, and you mentioned that you had trouble with the opening. So let's take a look. Open Sicilian and knight to c3. Yeah, I think this is so far so good. So nothing wrong in the first 5 moves here. This is very, very typical stuff. In fact, for those that don't know me, I actually wrote a whole book on the Open Sicilian. Called Modernized, the Open Sicilian. I had a co-author who's also international master, and it's a full white repertoire for playing e4 and then meeting every standard Sicilian with d4, the Open Sicilian, c takes d4, knight takes d4. It was a huge work. It's like over 500 pages, but I'm very, very happy with how it turned out because we came up with a lot of good ideas and analysis, and it was like 2 years of work, but the final product I'm really happy with. Yeah, and I got to learn a ton about the Sicilian, and now it's very, very useful for my own chess. So let's take a look. So here black played the move e5, which is actually a very, very kind of unknown move. Not unknown, but it's a very, very old move that hasn't been played by good players for a while because it's simply considered to be second rate compared to other moves. But it's important to it's important to understand why this line is bad, right? Okay, so in the game, white plays knight f5, which I think is a very reasonable move, but probably not best. I think most of you guys in the chat are probably familiar with the Najdorf defense, this move a6. And whenever I teach the Najdorf, I always try to get my students to understand the moves or the ideas behind each move. Why does black play this move a6 so early? Of course, it's to control the b5 square. That's pretty logical. It's pretty straightforward. But why exactly is that so important to do on move 5? Well, the idea is because this move e5 is really the move that black wants to play. This is the original Najdorf idea. But the problem here is not so much knight db5. This is not such a big deal because the d6 pawn is defended. Black can just play a6 here, and we're actually going to get this very similar to the Sveshnikov Sicilian, although a little bit different because b4 is a threat here. But the real problem here, pointed out by Mr. A Troll Have Come, bishop b5 check. And this is an annoying check, not because the king is in danger, but because white is going to be fighting for the light squares with this move. As soon as black plays e5, it's very important to recognize that black gives up 2 squares. He gives up d5 and he gives up f5. f5 is not a permanent weakness because he can play g6, but d5, that's going to be white's square for life. And as soon as black plays e5, white's main strategy becomes about trying to make the most use of this d5 square as possible. So why is bishop b5 so important? Well, now either black puts himself in a pin, and now knight f5 is a lot stronger because we're hitting d6, and this is just very annoying pressure right from the get-go. Or black plays bishop d7, and he trades off his light squared bishop, which is going to be his main defender of the light squares. So white plays bishop takes d7 here, let's say queen takes d7, knight f5, and here white is definitely getting an advantage. Now we have this knight on a really strong outpost. If g6, we can consider putting the knight on h6, but in a lot of cases we just drop back to e3 and we take full control over this d5 square. And if white can do this in the Sicilian, white is going to be getting a pretty serious strategic advantage. It's not a tactical advantage. You're not likely to, win material. It's a strategic advantage, meaning your pieces are going to be a little bit stronger, a little bit more effective in the position. And black is going to have to figure out what to do with this dark squared bishop, which in many cases ends up really passive. So this is kind of the reason why this e5 move is considered dubious. It's not a terrible move, but if white knows this idea with bishop to b5 check, and we get in this kind of position, white is going to have definitely the advantageous game here. We can also follow up with bishop to g5 and even take this knight just to establish our knight on d5. So this is kind of the key idea for white players to understand in this opening. Whenever black plays e5, we're looking to gain full control over the d5 square, and this bishop b5 check is very indirect, but it's a very, very smart idea to do this. Alright, but let's look at the game. The opening is interesting, but of course it's not everything. So here black played g6 and white puts the knight on h6. And this is a double-edged decision. A lot of times this knight ends up being extremely active. White already has ideas of like queen f3, knight d5, and if knight takes d5, queen takes f7 mate, or even bishop c4 and targeting this pawn. So it's a very aggressively placed knight, but if we're not able to make use of it, this knight can easily end up being, out of the game and being a very bad piece. I think against knight f5, a better move is to play something like d5. This is usually black's typical reaction, and notice that the bishop here is kind of targeting this knight. That's kind of the key idea for black, and that's the reason why this d5 break is working. So this is a really important idea for Sicilian players to remember, that to challenge this knight on f5, this d5 break is usually very annoying. So I'm not sure about this g6 move. Knight h6 looks very interesting. I just want to point out you can also play knight to e3 and go for this strategic game where you play bishop c4, you drop a knight on d5, castle, bishop g5, and white's whole play here just revolves around trying to control these squares c4 and d5. So this is another kind of more strategic way to play the position. But knight h6 is very interesting because this threat of bishop c4 is really annoying. Black played queen b6. I'm not sure what that's about. It doesn't really attack anything. H3, yeah, I'm not sure white really needs this move, to be honest, Same. Because h3, I don't really see what we're worried about on the g4 square, because knight g4 is covered. Maybe you're worried about bishop takes h6, and then knight g4, in which case, yeah, maybe this is an issue. I'm not really sure. If that's the case, then h3 is probably a useful move. We can also consider bishop e2 here. But I'm not sure. Let's analyze. Let's say we play bishop c4, kind of most natural move. Can black get away with this? Because we don't want to play bishop e3, and we don't want to play queen d2. Tattered Green has chosen the silence to subscribe. Thank you for doing that. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure, guys. I'm wondering what's I'm wondering what white to do here. I'm not using the engine, so I don't really have an immediate answer. But yeah, definitely annoying for white to deal with this, because it's like, it seems like the two bishops should be active, but I just don't see a move other than like queen d2, where, yeah, I think white's probably okay here, but not really getting anything special. Although maybe this is interesting. Knight takes, queen takes b2, and here it's kind of a thematic move. Maybe someone in the chat can try to figure out what white should play in this position. I'm not sure it's exactly the best move, but it does look like at least the most interesting move to me, to not give away a lot of material, but be able to keep the material and keep fighting for the advantage. Oh, for those of you that suggested queen f3 earlier, the problem is that black can play knight takes h6 in that position and cover f7. So king d2, found by Chess University student Mr. Allo World, warmed up from the earlier training session from Prodigy Program Lite. Quick plug. And yeah, I think this move actually leaves black with some serious issues, because the rook is ready to come to b1, and we're ready to play, let's say, maybe queen g7, knight d5, and start going after black's king on e8. So yeah, this is an interesting line. Maybe this is going for, but I understand the instinct now to play h3, because this is an annoying move to deal with. But maybe h3, maybe bishop e2 was better, but h3 leaves us the option to put the bishop on c4, so also makes sense. Okay, black decides to take on h6 and take on b2. Very, very risky move, and I think you didn't choose the right move here, Same. I don't think knight d5 is right, because this gives black an easy chance to just exchange and nothing's happening. White has no threats. How about you guys in the chat? Let's make this a little bit interactive. How should white react to this queen takes b2? I think there's maybe more than one way here for white, but what do you guys think? But hopefully you don't suggest king d2, because this move doesn't really make as much sense in this position. Of course, the knight is hanging, so we have to do something about that. But the question is, what should white do? So Tony says knight a4 or rook b1. Rook b1, is not really working because, well, black will just take the knight for free. Knight a4 is possible. This hits the queen. Queen b4 check, c3. Can take on e4 with check. So I'm not sure. I mean, black now has 2 pawns. It's not clear what white is getting. Okay, Sergey Smart says bishop d2. I think this move is more reasonable, but it's not my first choice because the bishop was active here and we have this very annoying threat with bishop to g7. I like knight b5. Yeah, I like this move because here we're of course getting the knight out of the attack and we have a ton of threats in the position. Knight c7, knight takes d6, bishop g7. Black can play this check, queen b4. Let's say we play c3, he can take this pawn with check. Let's say bishop e2. But here the difference between the knight on a4 and the knight on b5 is that the knight on b5 I think is a lot more active. So even though black is 2 pawns up here, I actually don't see how he's dealing with all these threats. Knight c7 check, knight takes d6, bishop g7. And if he takes on g2, I think things only get worse after bishop f3. This is a really nice and a really common way to trap the queen. So with that, I think we're getting hosted on chess.com. I just saw the notification. So shout out to the chess.com audience. I think I should probably open up the chess.com chat as well so that I can keep an eye on it. But to be honest, I'm mainly going to be following the chat on Chess University's channel, as I just opened the stream, so you guys heard my heard my show there. But okay, well, let's keep going with the game. So this clearly would have been good for white, and I think this was the way to go. And this is a really common idea for how to deal with this queen takes b2. So let's go back for those that just joined us. Queen takes b2, this was on the board. Yeah, I think knight b5, this is a really thematic way. And then after this line with bishop b2, it's very difficult to suggest a good move here for black because white has so many threats that win a lot of material. I think black is just busted here. But I don't know, I'm not using an engine, I could be wrong. Again, this is one of those positions where if there's a lot of tactics, you do want to feed it to the engine, to Stockfish, see what it suggests, see if it points out any immediate tactics that we missed. Okay, so knight d5 was played. Black trades on d5, gives this check. And here I think black is just doing fine. He's up a pawn. White doesn't have as much threat in the position as we did in the other line. Some compensation with the 2 bishops, but really not enough. So let's see how this game went. And so we end up getting this endgame. Yeah, to be honest, I don't like how white played this line because we're down a pawn, and so we need to go for something, more aggressive. C3, I don't really get the move because, well, we want to try and develop our pieces. Bishop d3, I'm not sure we can get away with because black just starts taking extra pawns. So yeah, it's not clear what to do. I think the position is just kind of good for black. Maybe a move like queen d3, but we don't want to trade queens. Probably we have to go with bishop b5 check. And if bishop d7, let's say we trade and castle just to get the pieces out. But the position has definitely turned, and black is definitely favored now, just winning material here. So I'll skip through a few moves here, and after bishop b5 check, black decided to play king e7. I don't like what black did here at all with queen h4 and queen f4. This is very confusing because, okay, we're up the pawn from black's point of view, but if you allow white to trade queens this way, then your extra pawn has just decreased in value, and you've given up the d4 square for white's bishop. So this was kind of a miss by black because he was so concerned with trading queens that he really, or she, really weakened their position. Now Now I feel like white has some play for the pawn. The pieces look active. The dark squared bishop here is nice. But black should still be reasonably solid here. And for those of you that are interested in submitting a game next, you'll have to be on the Chess University Twitch chat, where I'll be taking suggestions as soon as I'm done with this game. Okay, bishop d3 played, and I think this allows some tactics with bishop takes c5. So nice job here being tactically alert. This bishop on d3 was supported by the knight, so immediately we have to consider what happens if we just take the knight. And because we have this intermediate move, bishop takes g6 check, then this is white is just winning a piece here. So good job with the tactics. I assume you were able to win the game here from here without any trouble. But I'm just gonna check your technique just to make sure nothing insane happened, because that would be really interesting. And okay, took a bunch of material, bishop nice and solid on d4, and set up this nice checkmate. Okay, so good game. I think the most instructive moments were, like you said in the opening, against e5, it's important to remember that this line with bishop b5 check, this is the real reason, or the real way that white should fight for an advantage here, trading off the light squared bishops and then taking control over the c4 and d5 squares. And then queen takes b2. I think this was the second moment where we've sacrificed the pawn. We have to deal with this threat to the knight. We have this threat of bishop g7. Knight b5 here is definitely the thematic tactic, where it seems like black just does not have a good response here. So this would have been pretty strong. All right, I'm gonna save this game now. And like I mentioned, Same, if you want to get the PGN from me, all you got to do is send me an email, Kostya@chessuniversity.com, and I'll happily forward you the file, and you can have save the variations. Okay, so I have one game. I think I received an email from one of our students. So let me see if I can open that up, and I will be accepting more games as well. Here you go. Okay, so the game is from an over-the-board tournament from Mr. Wouter. Probably mispronouncing that, but okay, I did my best. And he says it ended up in a draw, but he had a winning position. It'll be interesting to get some tips on how to realize your winning advantage and spot the winning move. Absolutely. I think this is one of the most important sticking points for a lot of chess players when they're having a winning position, not being able to fully convert. Okay, so I'm going to copy it, and let me input some names here. So Mr. Otis, if you're in the chat, can you give some information about the opponent here? Like, what was their rating, and I think their last name. I'm just gonna put Frank. And I should be able to copy this game into live chess. And oh no, I mixed up the names. Okay, I have to redo this because you are playing black, and that's just gonna get super confusing. So let's fix that and copy the new game into the board. All right, here we go. And white's rating here is 1750. Okay, so pretty decent level. Hopefully gonna be an exciting game. And let's take a look. So we have another Sicilian and the Alapin variation. So yeah, this is kind of a simple choice for white. A lot of players like this move because the idea is very straightforward. You're just trying to play d4, gain a nice advantage in the center. And this move is, let's say, a lot less theoretical than the open Sicilian, but I would say it's no less complicated because you can get a variety of different structures here, and strategically leads to some very, very interesting positions. Okay, so black went with g6. I think this is a decent line. and you fight for the center with d5. And we get this structure, which is going to resemble a French, but the main difference is that black can still develop the bishop outside the pawn chain, which I noticed from the next few moves that you do. You end up putting your bishop on g4. Okay, knight h6. This move looks a little weird, but it's very understandable because, okay, of course we can't put the knight on f6, but we can develop the knight to f5 where it's going to be very well placed. Yeah, these positions are always tricky. A lot of times black seems like they're completely okay, but we have to remember that the bishop on g7 is always going to feel very restricted. So a lot of times black's play depends on this f6 break. All right. So Mr. Q Tunneler, I think I'll go over your game next because you've been around for a while. So make sure to stay tuned. In case the link gets deleted, I hope you're ready to send me it again, but I will do your game next, so stick around. Okay, so white played knight f3. Black takes the opportunity to pin. Bishop e2, knight f5. Yeah, I think this is all reasonably normal and makes sense. After h3, I assume black is willing to take on f3 and play a move like e6, and we get a very, very solid position, so we don't mind that we don't mind giving up the two bishops here. But the game went similarly, but not exactly. So first we castled, then h3 takes e6, and this is kind of like the beginning of the middle game. Okay, question from Sergey. When you analyze the game after it is finished with the help of the engine, do you agree that if your opponent has during the game used the engine, it can be seen in the results of the analysis? That's a very interesting question. In fact, a lot of times, you know, when I play an online game and I feel like my opponent, who's like this like unknown player, untitled, new to the site, has very few games, all of a sudden like just crushes me, you know, 3-0. Am I going to am I going to analyze? Sometimes I'll analyze the games and try to see, you know, how close to the engine, right, did my opponent play. I think you can only make, you know, inferences. Like, you can only take your best guess, because usually your opponent's moves are not going to match, you know, 100% with the engine. And a lot of times it's just a matter of judgment. There's no like clear 100% way to do it. Now, chess.com and these other sites, they do have this very like sophisticated software that can really detect cheating to, I think, amazing accuracy. But when you're doing it on your own, it's not so simple. Like, your opponent might play the best move and you think, aha, they're cheating, or maybe the best move was just kind of a natural move in the position. I would say the key thing to look for, if you're concerned about your opponents are cheating and you're analyzing the game afterwards, you know, in a winning position, do they continue to like play these fantastically strong moves, or do they kind of take the human route, start trading pieces, and they give up some of their advantage in order to simplify the game? Because that's how we convert, you know, the advantage. When we're up a rook, we're not looking for, you know, the most devastating way to checkmate. Usually we just want to trade queens and go into a safe endgame, even if we have to give up the pawn. So if your opponent is kind of playing naturally once they get this big advantage, it probably means that they weren't using, or at least they're not using the engine anymore. But again, it's all guesswork, so you can't really say for sure just by analyzing it, you know, yourself. Anyways, good question. I always love discussing engines and how to work with engines and that stuff, because it's very, very interesting and it's really easy to go wrong. Okay, well, getting back to the game, here white played bishop g4. Black plays knight e7, just kind of securing the knight, and bishop g5. Kind of an aggressive move, and I guess the idea is that if h6, maybe he even puts the bishop on f6. This can be kind of annoying to deal with. If we take on f6, play knight c6, I think this is still okay for black, because I don't see how white is going to be defending the f6 pawn. So takes, for example, we can take EF, but honestly, I don't see a reason not to take this way, just to keep the D5 pawn secure. And next we're going to take the F6 pawn, and then the D4 pawn is also going to be weak. So Otis, maybe you can mention some of your thoughts during the middle game here, kind of to engage a little bit, and let me know, what was going through your mind here. Did you feel like you had a good position? Did you feel like you're under pressure? Where do you think you could have played better, or do you think everything went normal here? Because black chose F6, which I think also makes sense, but it's a little bit double-edged because whenever we play this move, we are left with this weakness on E6. That said, I think it was a reasonable decision because this knight can come back to C6 and queen B6, and the pawn on D4 is very difficult for white to defend. So I feel like we've reached a pretty decent version of the French. The pawn on E6 is a weakness, but the pawn on D4 I think is just equally weak. So yeah, I think F6 here was quite reasonable. H6 was also worth considering because I'm not sure exactly what white's idea was. Because if he takes on E7, we can play knight takes E7, and I think black's position is perfectly good. Okay. So thank you to all those that are following, much appreciated. And like I've been mentioning, if you want to get your game analyzed, I have the next one set up, Mr. Q Tunnel, but after that I will be taking suggestions, and I'll try to get through as many games as I can in the show, as well as making all the games interesting and inciting and useful for everyone else. Okay, Oda says, I felt I was mostly under pressure and felt I was defending, but you also noticed that he never broke through. Yeah, I think after F6, I think black's position here is perfectly fine. Okay, he trades on F5, and you take with the rook, which I think is interesting. A lot of players would consider taking with the pawn, but then, yeah, I mean, we've kind of weakened our king side a little bit. This isn't the best structure to have on the king side. So rook takes F5 kind of keeps a little bit more dynamic activity, and your follow-up with queen F6, rook F8, I think is very logical. So rook AE1, queen F6, knight E2, rook F8, now F4. Well, I think, yeah, white kind of has to make this move because the F2 pawn was hanging. And now both sides have weaknesses, so the position has become very, very interesting strategically. I'm wondering if black could have played E5 here, but I'm not sure because, of course, we want to take the rook on F1, but DE5, knight takes E5, queen takes D5 with check, and I don't think black is really gaining anything because queen takes B7 is happening. Yeah, E5 would be a nice move, but doesn't seem to work. G5 is interesting as well, but this is gonna be risky. But I don't really see what's wrong with this move, to be honest. Because it looks like white is under huge pressure here because he can't take, of course, because F1 is hanging. And if he plays a move like G3, then this is, definitely weakening. And we can consider, for example, G takes F4. If knight takes F4, then I think we might be able to take the D4 pawn. Something like this. And white cannot take back on E6 because we trade on F1. Everything with check, and then of course we win back. Okay, All World suggests G4 instead of G3. And yeah, actually I missed this move, and it's a very important idea. So thank you for pointing that out. This is a nice one. Well, black is forced to sacrifice the exchange. And then we get this position, which I'm not sure. I mean, I kind of stumbled into this by luck because I didn't see G4 coming. But this might be okay for black because the D4 pawn is a big weakness. And we've given up the exchange, but we do have some play here. Yeah, so yeah, this is a little bit unclear, but maybe we don't want to give up the exchange with black if we don't have to. I don't know, rook d1, f3. Yeah, we definitely have some ideas here. I mean, I think black has compensation, but maybe not more with that. Okay, so queen g7. Understandable move because now g4 you can back up. White played g4 anyway. Okay, rook f7. Rook d1. Knight e7. Aha, so you're rerouting the knight to c8, d6, and e4. Yeah, I think this is exactly the right plan here. White he's making some demonstrations here with these pawn advances, but I don't think this is so impressive because, well, yeah, once the knight gets to e4, I think black's piece is going to be really strong. But of course he can challenge you with knight to c3, but then the knight on e2 isn't there, so it's not being such a good defender. Yeah, I don't like this for white. I think black has a lot of ways to kind of target white's weaknesses here. Okay, so the knight came to d6, and rook c7 is interesting to kind of challenge for the c file. But now, yeah, now it seems like white is kind of... does have some pressure here. Now white is like really controlling a lot of space. So something went wrong here for black. Maybe rook c7 is not the right way to go. Maybe just knight e4. Not to allow the queen in to e5. If he... Let's see. If he plays knight c3... I don't really want to trade off the knights, but I'm not sure I see another real choice. Yeah, maybe knight e4 is too early. Okay, so one kind of funny idea is to play rook e7 because c8 is covered, and this way we can challenge for the c file with rook to c7. We will have to defend the e6 pawn, but keep in mind whenever white takes on e6, he's going to have to deal with rook e7 and hitting the knight, so it's something to be calculated there. I saw the suggestion of h5 from the chess.com chat. It's not a bad move, but it doesn't really come with a threat, because if we take, he just takes back. And then he can play king g3 and really hold on to the center. So yeah, I think something went wrong here for black, because it seems like the position was quite promising. I'm kind of stuck on this position. Maybe rook h5 here. Now that we've kind of seen how the game progressed, and this happens a lot when you're analyzing games, you kind of go through the game, something goes wrong and you want to back up and see where things could have been avoided. Because this move prevents white from expanding with g4, which ends up being rather annoying. If he tries to, you know, really insist on it with king h2, I think it's okay. The rook can kind of sit on h4 here, and at least white doesn't get, you know, as much play as in the game. Okay, but let's take a look at what happened here. So now white is a little bit better, but black is still solid, so it's not super clear. And here white goes with queen to c7 in order to infiltrate on the c file on the 7th rank. Definitely makes sense. One move to consider here is, I think, knight d6 again, because now we're threatening to trade, and then after rook to c8, white doesn't really have a good way to continue, because either he gives up the file or he trades rooks, and if he gives up the file, then our rook comes in, and we're going to have easy counterplay, because a2 is weak, d4 is weak, black has a lot of targets in the position. So maybe knight d6 here. Queen b4 definitely seems interesting. White kind of backs up, making sure there's no queen to d2. And Oh, I got some bits from Esoteric. Thank you. Queen d6, knight e2, and g5. Yeah, I think you chose a good moment for this move because white's pieces are on the queen side here. G5 is a very, very nice break. After takes, the knight can come in, and this knight comes to e4, and now black is starting to make use of the weaknesses on the king's side. I like this move. Of course, the second point is after f5, you have ef5, and the knight on e2 is hanging. So nice job kind of finding the right moment for this pawn break. A lot of times this is really the key to creating play in the position. Okay, queen c5, queen a6, rook c2, and queen d3. So black has found a way to activate. Now you keep the queens on the board. Knight g5, and we're approaching the critical moment here where you mentioned that you had missed a clear win. Okay, queen to d3, queen e1 check, king g2, rook f8. Yeah, everything looks great for black. I mean, the pieces are just getting more and more active with every move. And then I guess this was the moment. Okay, so according to Mr. Otis, queen c1 here was winning, hitting the knight. And if the knight moves, we have queen f1 check with pretty devastating consequences. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I see the line you gave with queen e3, but yeah, we just take and win the knight, and yeah, there's no reason to really analyze further because black is just up the piece here. I mean, it's not an easy move to find, but it's basically, I guess it's a nice tactical shot to really stretch the opponent's defenses here. So the key question is, this is an over-the-board game, move 42. So what was the time situation here? I mean, whenever you make a mistake, you always want to first consider the context of the game. You know, were you down to 1 minute on the clock, right, or you have to blitz, or did you have like 30 minutes here, you know, plenty of time to look over your options? Because these are different situations, of course. Okay, so 10 minutes. And this is a usual case where you don't have that much time in a good position. And so it's not like you can just spend 5 minutes in every position looking very, very carefully for tactics. Okay, so I think queen c1 is not a difficult move to see, especially because, you know, with your last move, you've already kind of announced that your idea is to put some pressure on the f file. But after rook e2, it's hard because it's not like you can just spend all this time looking for a win. But at the same time, you do want to be tactically alert and always looking for those opportunities. I mean, queen h4 seems reasonable. White played queen g3. And now we decided to trade. I guess at this point, if we keep going back, then it's not clear, you know, what black's queen is doing, where white is kind of taken over. So let's see what happened in the game. We traded, and we got this endgame, and presumably you guys agreed to a draw here. So after queen c1, back there, we trade queens, and the knight on f4 is hanging. I'll show that real quick. So this is kind of the key line. So white can't defend the knight. If the knight moves, then queen f1 check is likely leading to mate, but minimum we have rook f3 just winning the queen. Yeah, so no reason to apologize, Mr. Q Tunneler. I mean, you should have seen my previous show where I was blundering all kinds of things in the simul. So yeah, I think this endgame, well, this move knight g5 check is definitely questionable to me because the knight is good on e4. I guess you were trying to defend the pawn here, but maybe king f7. I think actually black has reason here to be slightly optimistic because we do have the strong knight on e4, and if we can get to the c file, then we definitely have some play. So I feel like the game is not over. Black can keep kind of pushing for the win here, Maybe white should definitely play rook to c2 in order to challenge for the file. And I'm not sure, it's close to equal, but let's say we play rook e8. If we give check, we'll play rook e7. And if we go into the same knight endgame, well, it's a little bit better than the game because at least black's king is a little bit more active here. I think it's probably still equal, but I would consider taking black because we do have some obvious ways of targeting white's pawns. I feel like the pawn structure is slightly better here. You can attack this pawn on d4, but nothing too serious. So a drawn game is probably a fair result. Okay, so let's talk about maybe this position here. Yeah, so basically the question that kind of this game focused on, you know, how to convert a winning position, right? Or how to work on this skill. What I will say is that winning a one position is difficult because, of course, you have to be usually precise and accurate until the end. When your opponent is defending, and if your opponent is a strong player, they're going to be looking for any resource, any potential chance to get back in the game. And tactically, you have to be very, very alert and precise in a lot of games to finish people off. And as you get stronger, you go up in level, you start playing 2,000 rated players, 2,100s, 2,200s, 2,300s. Believe me, the level of defense really goes up and it becomes very, very difficult to crack a determined and stubborn opponent. But here are a couple suggestions for how to improve your technique. Number one, when you analyze your game, it's important to understand, did you miss some kind of dynamic opportunity? Like this case here is a tactical opportunity that we missed. Or was it a matter of bad technique, meaning you had a strategically winning position, extra pawn, dominating pieces, you know, better pawn structure, but you just weren't able to finish off the win, or you allowed some kind of counterplay. Those are two very, very different scenarios. In one scenario, it's very important to, you know, work on your tactics, solve a lot of puzzles, be very consistent, really try to improve your tactical ability so you're not missing these resources that you would find normally. In the second case, which is a little bit more complicated, you kind of have to look at the psychology. It's like, if you have a great position that you're not converting, is it because you're playing too timidly? You know, you're not finishing the game off, you're letting your opponent back in, or are you trying to win too quickly? You know, you're trying to finish things off immediately, you let things get complicated, you give your opponents chances. Are you missing some ideas in the endgame, or is it a matter of not understanding the strategy and the position? Sometimes you can have a great position, but the only way to win is to trade off the rooks, or trade off a pair of knights, or trade off a key bishop. And if you're not strategically in tune with what's going on and not figuring that stuff out, then of course you're going to struggle in that phase of the game. But yeah, it really takes some detailed analysis to figure out what exactly went wrong, and then you have to work to, let's say, correct the problem. I see the question in this position, can black just exchange queens here with queen e4 check? Yeah, I think the reason this is not my first instinct is because in this case, black has a dynamic advantage that white's king is a little bit uncomfortable. If we trade queens, then the king safety is no longer a factor. Because in the endgame, the king is going to be very safe if all black has is a rook and knight. So I don't think, it definitely wouldn't be my first choice, but it is an interesting idea because sometimes if you can trade queens and go into a favorable endgame, of course this can be very good. But here let's take a look. After takes, if knight takes e4, I think the problem is that white is already set up to infiltrate on the 7th rank. And maybe this isn't good for black because I actually don't see how we're going to be defending our pawns here. We don't want to play a move like rook to b8 because knight takes e6 is going to be very, very difficult to deal with. If we play d takes e4, this might be dynamically a little bit more interesting because we can play rook d8 and attack this pawn. So I'm not sure. This would be a pretty unclear position. We also have to consider moves like h4. attacking the knight and trying to take the e6 pawn. So queen e4, probably not the good move here, because when we're the ones with the initiative, we're the ones trying to attack. We want to keep queens on the board because this is our strongest piece, and we don't want to give white a chance to escape into the endgame, especially an endgame where the rook is already very well placed on c2. Okay, so I'm going to save the PGN here, and Mr. Wouter, Otis, I'll be I'll reply to your email. I'll send you the game with some of the variations, so you can save that for yourself. Okay, I think the next game belongs to Mr. Q Tunneler. So let me see if I can bring up your game here. And then after that, I think we should have time for another game. So stay tuned, and I'll try to get in as many games as I can before the end of the show. And make sure to follow the channel, guys, if you haven't already, so that you can be notified, you know, when we're live. And our idea here with Chess University is to kind of be like the educational stream. You know, if you guys want like to see fun, bullet chess, you can check out Chess Bra. You know, if you want to see the nicest guy ever who's a really good chess player, you can watch John Bartholomew. But if you want the super educational stuff, you gotta stick with Chess University. Okay, so let me grab the game here, and let's keep doing it like we've been doing before. So Mr. Q Tunneler, maybe you can let us know some background info about the game. I see this was one move per 3 days, so it was a correspondence game. And maybe you can let me know what was interesting to you about the game, or if there's anything specific that you would like to analyze in this game. Seems like you are playing white, so let's flip that here. And Tony says, I wonder if you can analyze any of the candidates' matches when the games are over. Well, I mean, I'd be happy to give you my thoughts. I mean, this has been honestly the most exciting candidates tournament in a while. I mean, in terms of the game, I think 3 candidates ago in London 2013, where Magnus won, and he was racing with Kramnik to get this match with Anand. I think that one was kind of the competitively very, very exciting to watch, because of course it was Magnus's best chance to get into the World Championship. And but as far as the games go, I mean, this one has been absolutely crazy. I mean, really just unusual and I mean, exciting. You know, like it's always fun, but people think that GMs and IMs are really serious, but all my friends that are, you know, title players, we're watching the candidates with as much awe as like any random chess fan. I mean, we all love the Kramnik versus Aronian game. The Kramnik versus Caruana game was I remember we were watching that at the Reykjavik Open just after the closing ceremony. So we had just finished the tournament, and everyone was like glued to the phone watching Kramnik and Caruana play out this amazing endgame. So yeah, it's just been a completely riveting tournament. Just so many interesting players. I'm happy to see that Mamedyarov has brought his absolute best form. I mean, this guy, along with Aronian, really took over in 2017. But of course, Levon, unfortunately, is not having his best event. But right now, it seems like Fabi is the front runner, and that's very exciting, because I think everyone in the world has wanted to see a Caruana versus Carlsen match ever since 2014, the Sinkfield Cup, where Fabiano, you know, went 7-0 in the first 7 rounds, including destroying Magnus in like a very, very nice win with black. Ever since that happened, the whole world has been wanting to see a Caruana versus Carlsen match, and now it seems likely. So I'm rooting for Fabiano at this point, because that match is going to be amazing. Okay, so Q Telner says he thought he should have been able to get something started on the king side with the Panov, but he obviously doesn't know what he's doing in these positions. Okay, so let's take a look. So your opponent played the Caro-Kann. You chose the Botvinnik-Panov attack, which is Panov-Botvinnik attack, which is definitely a reasonable choice. A lot of times you do get the isolated queen pawn here, and it's important to know how to play it. I don't exactly know the theory in these lines. This bishop d6 move looks a little bit unusual to me. Bishop g5 makes sense, castles. And here, I mean, we can consider taking on d5, but probably not. This is not going to be very, this is a risky pawn to take. Because black has queen a5 check, black has rook e8 check. I mean, white is down in development. I think it's probably makes sense for white not to grab this pawn. You instead chose c5, which is very, very common way to kind of gain some space on the queen side here. Yeah, I like this move c5. I think this makes a lot of sense. I believe, I could be wrong, but there are positions in this line where black plays bishop e7 and then white just plays c5 without gaining the tempo in order to kind of get the space advantage and eventually, not right away, eventually push pawns on the queen side with like b4. But first you have to develop like bishop d3 castles and then b4. So with the bishop on d6, it makes sense to make this natural move and also get a tempo while doing it. So I like this decision very much. I think white should definitely have a lot of reason to be optimistic here. Okay, so castles h6, you put the bishop here, which makes a lot of sense because this diagonal is pretty juicy. And black plays knight b8. So knight b8 is unusual. I mean, the idea seems to be to put the knight on c6, but this is taking a lot of time, so I don't think this is great for black. But clearly he was feeling very, very backed up because white is starting knight to b5, and that's going to be a very annoying move as well. So yeah, something really went wrong for black in this opening. I don't like this move bishop d6, and clearly knight b d7 is not a good move if he just has to go back with knight to b8. I see the suggestion to play rook e8. But I don't think black is in time here after knight to b5 because we're already threatening knight c7 and bishop c7, by the way, maybe even a better move. So yeah, black really misplayed the opening. Bishop f4 is a nice move, much better than just going back bishop h4. Okay, knight b8, h3. Yeah, I think, I don't know. It seems like white has this big lead in development, big space advantage. Do we really need h3? I mean, is knight h5 a huge concern here since we do have bishop e5? I'm not sure. I think it was definitely worth considering to make this move, knight b5. We're threatening knight c7. We're threatening to put the bishop on d6. I think white gets some very, very nice activity here. Black might have to play a move like knight e6 and then let's say bishop d6 followed by knight e5. I think we just hammer on the dark squares and we put all of our pieces on these outposts. I think white's position is really good. If black doesn't trade on d6, we'll take on e7, we'll put the knight on d6, and then we'll even take on a6 at some point and just get a pass c pawn. So in my opinion, probably knight b5 was the way to go here. Another move, knight e5. You stop knight h5 with active means, and this move kind of indicates more aggressive intentions, but I think white absolutely has reason here to play queen d2 and then consider sacrificing on h6. Because we have the big space advantage, we have the bishop on d3, and we have an easy follow-up of just bringing the rook to e3 and lifting the rook and getting a checkmate. I think white would have pretty serious chances here. Let's say knight c6 will trade, queen d2, rook ae1. I really like white's position here. I think we have a big strategic advantage. We don't necessarily have to sacrifice, but this is usually very dangerous when the queen can get to h6, bishop is sitting on d3, and then rook e3, rook g3 is usually a very, very good follow-up. Andrew Muses, we're actually doing a stream every Sunday from 2 to 4 p.m. Pacific time. And I think we switch off. So next week we'll be doing a simul. I think I'll be playing a simul actually. So if you guys want to check that out, you can make sure to tune in, next week at this time and play against me. The first simul I did was really interesting. I had a lot of great games and 2 very, very embarrassing games where I willingly went into a king and pawn end game that was easily and tragically losing for me. So that was quite something. I'll have to get some revenge in some king and pawn endgames this time. Okay, so let's see. Let's go to the game. Although Tony asks, I commonly see black respond with g5 after queen e2. Do you mean queen d2 and g5? And I guess is the question whether or not white should sacrifice? Well, here I think I would. I would consider it, I should say, because this kind of attack is almost always very, very dangerous here. Let's say we play queen h6 check, king g8, and a move like f4. This is something that is usually a very, very common idea, a very common way to attack. The point is, of course, to play rook f3, rook g3. We can also bring in the second rook. And black's problem is that this knight is stuck on f6, defending this h7 square. And so black just doesn't have a good way to challenge white for the attack. Note that the bishop on c8 is just stuck. So black just has no way of... I don't see a good way for black to defend against this attack. It honestly just looks winning. Like rook e8, rook f3, bishop f8, rook g3. Black is not in time. So this is the thing to look for, and it's kind of it's a little bit of a paradox. It's like white got this strategic advantage with c5, and all of a sudden the best plan is to go for a kingside attack. Well, this is kind of, actually, it's one of my core philosophies when I'm teaching chess. Strategy and tactics are always intertwined. You rarely get, good tactics from a position or a combination without having a strategically sound position. And this is, I think, this idea comes from Steinitz, the first world champion. He was the guy, this was kind of his key thesis about chess. He's like, tactics come from good strategic positions. And I like to take it one step further. I think tactics and strategy are always connected. You're always considering both at the same time. So h3, I think this move is okay, but it's not the most aggressive way to play the position. I think a move like knight e5 would have been a lot stronger, or knight b5 also looks very good to me. All right, let's keep going. Bishop d7, a3, bishop c6, b4. I think this is definitely a good plan for white. I'm not sure why you needed to play a3 here. I don't see a reason that you couldn't have just played b4 immediately, because this can be preferable if we're able to play a4 in one move. And after bishop c6, we can play b5. So black's plan is going to be completely useless here. So bishop d7, a3, I think b4 is just a better way to go about it, because a6, you end up playing a4 anyway, so there's no reason to play a3. You would have saved time just playing b4 first and then a4. But okay, you corrected, you found the nice plan. Now black plays b6, and white breaks through with b5. Absolutely, looks really good. Takes. And we played c6. Yeah, very nice. I mean, this is a pretty simple move, but this is just winning a piece because c7 is coming and black is forced to give up the bishop with bishop takes c6. So I think overall a very decent game by white. Definitely we could have played better to realize our advantage, but this is clearly good enough. I mean, extra piece is an extra piece. Okay, now black decided to trade queens, which white is fine with because we're ahead in material. And you set a nice trap here, kind of tempting black to play rook a1, but of course bishop h7 check would be a nice retort. So knight e4, takes. f4, and black resigned here, presumably because they're just down a piece. Maybe we could have been a little bit more accurate here. I always like just trading off all the knights. So this is definitely doable too. And white should be able to realize his position with the 2 extra knights pretty easily. But overall, nice game. Definitely could have played better, but I think you did fine. I mean, you found the right plan with a4, b4, b5, and then once you won the piece, you very simply traded off all the pieces, and you made the most use out of your advantage. So no complaints here. Doc Holiday 30, didn't Fischer say that? Did he borrow the quote from Steinitz? He might have said that, but yeah, Steinitz was kind of the first player to kind of give express this idea that strategy and tactics are connected, and that in order to be able to use your pieces effectively and find combinations and winning tactics, of course that comes from having a good control over the center, well-placed pieces, healthy pawn structure, healthy king, strategic goals. Okay, Mr. Flipsync says maybe consider tactics first. If that doesn't work, then play strategic. Yeah, this is what a lot of players do. Like in any position, you first look to see if there are any tactics, and then if not, then you kind of think about how to improve your position strategically. But the things are still very, very connected. You can think about the tactics, you can think about the strategy of the position, but your success is going to come when you are able to merge them both. Because a lot of times when we're thinking strategically, it's important to remain tactically alert. For example, if I can give I think this game was a good example here. When I suggested this move, knight e5, it seems like a strategic move, right? We're improving the knight, we're putting it on a outpost, but the idea, the follow-up is very, very tactical indeed, right? We're trying to just set up the sacrifice. So strategy, tactics, if you separate them, a lot of times you're going to miss tactical opportunities when you're playing strategically, and you're going to make bad strategic decisions when you're trying to play tactically. So we always want to keep these things together, don't separate. All right, guys, I have time to analyze one more game. So if someone wants to link me to their game, we basically have like 10 minutes left, so we can do one last interesting game. Maybe someone has like a miniature, a game that's under 20 moves, or 25 moves, I should say. Oh, and I'm going to download this game. So Q Tunneler, if you want the variations from this game, send me an email, and I'd be happy to forward you that. Shout out to Cheeky Chess TV and Zaim A. Okay, question from the Chess TV chat. Am I familiar with the England Gambit? No, actually I'm not. But maybe I have seen it, but I just don't. I can't recall the exact moves or how that goes. We're actually not analyzing any game right now, but if someone has a game they would like analyzed on the show, we have time for basically one more. And if it's a quick one, I'd be happy to look at it. Or if someone in the Chess TV chat has a game, then you can just send me the game number. Or like a link. A link would be very, very useful. Just the link to the game if you played it on chess.com, or PGN, and then I can copy it into the analysis board, and we can take a look. Do you analyze 3 Czech chess? I mean, I haven't yet, but I definitely could. I'm definitely not an expert. I would say I have I have a vested interest in 3 checks because I really like that game, but I'm a totally an amateur player, maybe like 1600. Okay. I see a game here from Mick the Hammer. Let me click on this game. And but if there's someone in the Chess University chat that has a game and you want to send in the link, now would be the time. Yeah, Mr. Alloworld, student from Chess University Prodigy program. You should send in the miniature, either post a link or you can even probably post the whole game in the chat, and we can take a look. Okay, sent me via email. Excellent. Let me pull up this game real quick. And I think they're only going to be hosting us on chess.com until 4 p.m., so about 10 more minutes. So if you guys are watching on chess.com and the show suddenly drops out, then you should switch over to the Chess University Twitch, where we're going to continue until we finish with this final game. Okay, here we go. Okay, so Allo World, tell us a little bit about this game, and happy to analyze it on the show. And yeah, thanks for everyone who followed the Chess University Twitch channel. This is the best way to stay in touch with the channel, and whenever we go live, which is basically this time every Sunday, you can get the notification, and you can tune in for the show. I think next week we're going to do a simul, and we're going to kind of switch off between game analysis, which I think is really instructive, and of course a live simul, which is also fun, but it can be very instructive as well. Okay, so here our hero is playing black, and this was a classical game, so 1 hour and 30 minutes for 40 moves, plus 30 minutes sudden death over the board. Okay, so we have accelerated dragon, and white goes for early knight takes c6 and bishop d4. Kind of an unusual move, right? Normally white goes for this bishop c4 here as the main line. Knight takes c6. Usually the idea to take on c6 is to push e5, and I think this is a line here, but bishop d4 is a little bit different. Okay, so black played castles here. Makes sense. Bishop c4 and d6. I'm curious if d5 was considered here at all by black, because of course we have the slight lead in development, and if we can get this d5 break in comfortably, usually in the Sicilian, usually this is quite nice for us. Of course we have to check some tactics with bishop takes f6, but if white gives up the dark squared bishop, a lot of times our dark squared bishop puts so much pressure on the long diagonal that it's usually worth it. So let's take a look. So bishop takes f6. Take, e takes d5. E takes d5. And yeah, maybe bishop takes d5 here, hitting the rook. And how would black continue here? But maybe black just continues rook to b8. Let's say we go with the simple choice. There are some more complicated options. I would also consider this move bishop a6 in order to cut white from castling. And if he takes on a8, let's say queen takes, it's not an easy position to play because we're threatening queen takes g2. We're potentially threatening to trade and play queen e4 check. I think it's not a super easy position here for white to play. Maybe queen d2, and if we take, then white can castle. But after queen d2, we also have rook to d8. So yeah, I feel like actually black gets some very, very interesting play here with this move bishop a6. This is definitely something that an engine can let you know much better than I can, just to immediately tell you whether it's working. But this move rook b8 is also interesting to me because here we've only sacrificed one pawn and we are threatening b2. And if we can take the b2 pawn, then black's dark squared bishop becomes very, very strong. So this is definitely worth considering as well. And oh, I see the suggestion queen b6 from the Chess TV chat. Yeah, queen b6 is also possible, but of course would have to be calculated. But yeah, I like rook b8 here. So if white castles, we can take on b2, and I think black's position is doing great. It's important that bishop takes f7. We always have king takes to keep our queen protected. If white plays, let's say, bishop b3, here we have some options. We can play queen a5. We can also consider allowing white to trade queens even though we're down a pawn, but playing for the initiative in the endgame, because here white's king is just stuck. And this can be difficult defense for white. Though I'm not sure, because we are in the endgame, we are down a pawn, maybe rook d1, and white is kind of holding. Yeah, so definitely an interesting opportunity here to play d5. I think this is a very interesting move. But yeah, I have to analyze further with the engine. If white doesn't take on f6, then I think black just has a great position. Like if e5, we can just take on c4, and we win a pawn this way, and I think this is perfectly good for black. And if they take and just move the bishop, well, here this is where we have to really go for it, because the king is stuck on e1, at least for the moment, and this kind of position is usually giving black very, very good chances here, like f4, knight g4, or queen b6. I think black is doing great. In fact, this might be just game over, because like we're gonna take here and get the dark squared bishop. We have queen h4. I think black is doing great. So the critical line, of course, is bishop takes f6, and yeah, kind of important to analyze with the engine there to see if that's working for black or not. Okay, d6 was played. f4. And c5. Oh, and this is exciting. As a little reward for those of you tuning into our stream today, there's a special promo code, Sunday Show, so you get $5 off on any course at Chess University. Wow, that's awesome. I might even use that myself, even though I already get access to the courses. But I like getting $5 off on anything. It feels like you've earned $5. Anyways, that's a nice treat. I actually didn't even know that was happening. But okay, white played f4 and now c5. So I think this move makes a lot of sense, just kind of challenging immediately on the dark squares. e5. Wow, so white really goes for it, but I'm very, very skeptical because, well, the king is still on e1. Black hasn't really done anything wrong. I mean, we've played a pretty standard dragon setup. So usually these kind of like caveman attacks are not going to work out, but it does does require some calculation here in order to make everything work. Okay, let's see what happened. Takes on d4, takes on f6, and just calm recapture. I think this was the right reaction, and seems like white doesn't get enough for the sacrifice material. Okay, queen f3 was played, hitting the rook, and I like black's next move a lot, taking the knight, because we get a knight for the rook, we get this b2 pawn, and clearly black just gets a ton of compensation with this pawn on b2. So yeah, I think queen f3 is not the right move, and taking on c3 is a good way to punish it. Of course we can play rook b8 also, or like bishop f5, but I like this. I think black just gets a winning position here. So let's see the follow-up. Queen a5 check, king f1, bishop e6, and it seems like we're just winning material here. So black was definitely alert here with the tactics. Queen c6, rook c8, and we're winning the bishop. Yeah, I think this queen f3 move was just flat out losing, and black found a nice refutation to finish off the game. Yeah, this part is always fun, the chasing the king with the queen, 2 bishops. I really want to see rook c5 here just to get all the pieces into the attack. But okay, I think forced mate is probably good enough. So pretty nice finish there with h5. Yeah, I think this was actually a really instructive game because white kind of went for this really aggressive action with bishop to d4. Black just castled d6. And here I think white really just kind of went haywire with e5. This was too much too early, and he was punished accordingly. You just can't give up your dark squared bishop in the dragon like this without really getting something in return. I think black's position ends up being too favorable. Well, if he had backed up with bishop to e3, then knight to g4 I think is a good follow-up here. I see the comment from Lightning, instead of c takes d4 to play knight to g4. This is possible, but I'm not 100% sure because white will play bishop g1. And then d takes e5, we always have to consider that we're giving up the c5 pawn. I actually like just taking the dark squared bishop immediately because we win material and we get the dark squared bishop, which is just a really important piece. Now white definitely should have played a move like knight d5 here, but yeah, we can back up and I think black should have a pretty crushing advantage. And yeah, if he went back bishop e3, knight g4, let's say bishop g1, I think a move like queen a5, and it's just like there's just so many things in white's position that are hanging that it's a very, very difficult position. You know, you have to be careful with white against the Sicilian. You can't just push your pawns forward and hope that you don't get bit. You know, it's a very very counter-attacking opening. All right, guys. Well, I'm gonna save this one, and Albert, I'll be happy to email you this analysis. But overall, pretty solid game. I think you took advantage of your opponent's kind of early aggressiveness. And with that, I think we're going to wrap up the show here. As you guys can hear, I'm already kind of losing my voice a little bit. I taught 2 classes earlier for Chess University's Prodigy program. Now we did the 2-hour stream. And I had a really good time. This was my first time doing game analysis for Chess University. I did it before for chess.com, but now I have a couple of experience under my belt, and hopefully it was instructive for you guys because of course it's always interesting to see your own game analyzed, but when you're watching someone else's game a lot of times it can feel like, well, this isn't useful for me. But hopefully I was able to give you guys some good advice overall on how to play good, strong, strategic, tactical chess. And yeah, we'll be doing this stream every Sunday from this exact time, 2 to 4 p.m. Pacific time. I'll be doing the show next week as well, and I'll be doing a Sunday simul, where I'll be playing a bunch of different students. I think last week or a couple of weeks ago I played I think 28 people, and so I'll try to play around this number again, 28, 30. And it'll be a lot of fun. I like to analyze the games as I'm playing and offer, you know, little tidbits of strategic chess advice and so on. And it's a good time. So hopefully you guys will stick around. And yeah, once again, if you haven't yet followed this channel on Twitch, make sure to do so you can see when we're live. And if you're interested in, you know, starting, let's say, a more structured, serious training, definitely visit chessuniversity.com. I'm really happy with the training and the courses that we provide. I think it's some of the best chess improvement stuff out there. All right, well, thanks everyone for tuning in. I might stick around in the chat a little bit if anyone has any last second questions about my hair. I know everyone is really, really curious. But until next time, guys, I'll see ya. So take care.